Hi, my name is Laurie Lockley from Optimise. In this presentation I want to describe to you our approach to stakeholder engagement. No matter what type of business you're in or what role you play, everyone has stakeholders that need to be satisfied. As organisations become flatter and more interconnected, the onus on maximising stakeholder engagement has never been more critical, but also never more complex. We believe that our unique approach to stakeholder engagement can reduce that complexity and enhance stakeholder engagement at all levels of the organisation. Well, just who are our stakeholders? Well, they are basically anyone that can influence our performance in our roles. Now, I know we have a lot, but just perhaps some may be more important than others. So we need a good way of identifying just who are our critical stakeholders. Traditional approaches suggest that we need to manage our stakeholders, say just like this, right? Well, maybe it's not quite as easy as that. We often bemoan the fact that at least some of our stakeholders are paying little attention to us. As frustrating as this can be at times, just perhaps you may not exactly be the centre of their world. So if we are to engage with them, we need to understand just who is their world. Now, Optimise has developed an online survey tool where you, in your role, can be surveyed for who you think are your significant stakeholders. We believe that at this stage of the process it is important to let individuals identify who they think are their key stakeholders and then to compare notes later. In this way we are less likely to miss anyone. Stakeholders can be simply picked off a prepared list, or new stakeholders can be simply added by the respondent to come up with a complete list. Now, once we have selected our stakeholders, we are given the opportunity to rate their relative performance. We ask 3 questions. What is the level of influence that they have over your performance? At what level do you think that they would advocate for your role? And finally, what level of attention or focus do you currently accord to them? The next step is to start to classify stakeholders in terms of performance. Now, we use a 2x2 matrix to help us do that. On the top right, we have the high influence, high advocacy stakeholders. They are our promoters, or the good guys if you like. On the top left, we have the high influence stakeholders that don't advocate too highly for us. These are the bad guys, or at least the stakeholders we need to turn around somehow. On the bottom right, we have the high advocacy folks who unfortunately don't have a lot of influence. These are our friends. Maybe they can help us turn around some of the bad guys. And finally, we have the low influence, low advocacy minorities. The biggest danger here is that we might be spending too much time with them and not enough with our more influential stakeholders. So really, we need to put our focus up here on the stakeholders that can have the most influence on our performance. Now, from our survey results, we can plot each of the stakeholders identified by our survey respondents. Their average influence and advocacy can be plotted on the prioritisation matrix. As shown on the previous slide, the relative level of focus or attention is shown by the relative size of the circles. We can overlay our categorisations to help with the prioritisation process. As you can see, we have chosen in this case to also show stakeholders as either internal or external to our organisation. Fortunately, we don't have too many opponents, but the ones shown aren't getting a lot of attention at the moment. Many of our stakeholders fall in the minorities area, so we need to be careful on how we apportion our time here. We do, however, have a number of promoter stakeholders who are highly influential and advocate well for us. While on average they are getting plenty of attention, we need to drill down a little to see if that attention is being effectively employed. It is important here to clearly differentiate between stakeholder engagement and stakeholder management. We believe the critical difference is that engagement requires a two-way value exchange. Management is typically cast as a one-way focus activity, so let's now have a look at how we can analyse for this. Now, drilling down, we want to look at the connections that our most important stakeholders have. In this first map, you can see that the social worker is the target role, and the blue nodes are roles that share an influence relationship with the social worker. The thickness of the lines reflect the relative strength of the influence. Now, it's important to note that not all relationships are two-way. For example, my role might accord another role a level of attention or focus that is not reciprocated. When we remove all the one-way attention links, we find that what is left is relationships where attention or focus is being reciprocated. We think that these relationships are the healthiest. By definition, therefore, those that aren't have room for improvement, and these are the ones we would take forward into our value exchange exercise. Now, to reiterate, what exactly do we mean by engagement? For effective engagement, we need a value exchange between roles. And value can come in two forms. We have the tangible, expected or contracted forms of value in terms of products, services, reports, money, etc. These will often map to formally defined business process flows. Secondly, we have the intangible, non-contractual or informal value flows. These are typically related to the softer relationship aspects. They could be in the form of encouraging hints and tips, feedback, advice, advocacy, recommendations and the like. Intangibles are often seen as those little extras that make the difference between being a tolerated relationship and a truly engaged one. Now, what we need to do is to start to articulate these value flows. We will have identified two roles to participate in a value exchange activity. At least one of these will be from our high promoter stakeholders. Each role, which could have several participants, is asked to brainstorm value flows to and from the other partner role. We ask for each role to consider flows in both directions. We also like them to identify value flows that are both intangible or either intangible or tangible. We typically find that the tangibles are easier to articulate. The intangibles tend to be harder. We need to think of situations where we had excellent relationships and ones where the relationship was not so good, and think about the behaviours that may have been attached to the different situations. And that tends to help us sort of articulate the intangibles. Now, we've developed some pre-printed cards to help with this process. In this case, we have the customer service role brainstorming what it can offer to the social worker role. It has identified deliverable, assigned a relative cost or risk of providing this to the social worker, and then they can brainstorm in the other direction, and we look at what the customer service role might like to receive from the social worker. This time the customer service role can identify a value rating because they are the receiver of the value flow. Okay, so let's change hats here and look over the fence at the social worker role and their brainstorming. On the other side of the fence we have the social worker role brainstorming value exchanges from the customer service role. It looks like here that the social worker is looking for some more personal attention. Sounds like an intangible to me. And in return they're prepared to document the needs according to the required formats, which should help the customer service folks out. Well, up to now, the brainstorming sessions have generated some consensus within roles. It's now time to see if we can gain consensus on an agreed value exchange between roles. We call this the cards on the table session, where roles are asked to share their brainstorming results with their partner. Now, wouldn't it be nice if the cards matched exactly? Unfortunately, this is rarely the case. However, we can expect there will be some agreement on some exchanges, so we can put these aside as quick wins. Now for the rest, we will need to negotiate. Wherever possible, it's best to have this negotiation face to face. This is the time to get creative. We may need to revisit our overall organisational objectives. Most likely it will be the first time you'll have ever articulated or negotiated around intangible value deliverables. And the output we are looking for are agreed value exchanges. These can be captured on our partnership scorecards. Both costs and values will now be recorded on agreed value flows. Once complete, these agreed value flows can be recorded for each role. Collectively, each role can therefore have collated all value flows committed to for each role that they have negotiated with. Well, so far so good. No doubt commitments will have been made to deliver on things that aren't being done now. Otherwise, the relationship would not have been identified for targeting in the first place. Each role, however, will have some clearly articulated value deliverables that they will need to deliver in order to achieve the required levels of stakeholder engagement. Optimise has tools to help monitoring performance against agreed deliverables. Each role can be surveyed against agreed deliverables. This can be either done as a self-assessment of how we think we're going against our commitments. Alternatively, you can have the customers, if you like, of your value deliverables assess our performance. Unlike the balanced scorecard, the partnership scorecard is not a single card. Each role will be both a provider and a recipient, and therefore may be assessing as well as being assessed. We also need to be prepared to adjust some commitments over time to ensure that relationships are free to evolve with the business environments in which they operate. So in summary, why do we think that our approach to stakeholder engagement is special? Well, firstly, we believe we are unique in the way that we look at the whole stakeholder network of influences. Secondly, we have designed specific tools to help identify, visualise, analyse and prioritise our stakeholders. Thirdly, our approach for negotiating value exchanges to enhance stakeholder engagement goes well beyond other approaches which focus simply on developing communication plans. And finally, our partnership scorecard is unique in the way that it facilitates peer-to-peer accountability as opposed to the traditional top-down scorecards. So let me close with a little bit about us. We started up nearly 4 years ago to focus on helping organisations optimise their business relationships. We specialise in the use of advanced organisational analysis tools, or what we sometimes call the organisational X-ray. We apply our long experience in interpreting and diagnosing organisational X-rays based on a decade or more of collected case studies. Much of what we've learned is now available through our stakeholder engagement collection of software products and workshop techniques. Please go to our website to find out more. If you like, join our Friends of Optimise network to meet up with others with similar interests to you. I thank you for your attention.